from faith to faith. It's an ongoing process of being saved. Soterion. We're constantly being saved from ourselves. You know, God doesn't come just to deliver us from hell. Jesus doesn't just come to deliver us from hell. He actually comes to save us from ourselves. Because, anyway, how's it going, guys? How's everybody doing tonight? This is probably going to be brief. That's why I just jumped right into it. We got Rocky laying on his side there. He's probably even tired. He's probably tired of hearing my voice. But anyway, got a wolf sneaking up behind him there. But yeah, like I said, this angle probably really sucks. But the only way you guys are going to actually hear me at this point, if I'm right here in front of the microphone, until, you know, we get something to actually make this an actual legitimate podcast, our service, if that's what it is. But yeah, we're constantly being saved from ourselves. I mean, we talked about how Adam had fallen and how God's original vision, his original intent for man was to have a family like himself, a family of faithers, a family of trusters. Adam was to be like God. He was like to be God on this planet, like the God of this world, God with a little G. He was to rule and reign on this earth as God rules and reigns in heaven. And, you know, God gave him one commandment. Out of all the trees that are in the garden, you can eat of all of them, except the one in the very center of the garden. The day you eat of it, you're going to die. You know, in the biblical stories for kids, it's an apple. Probably was some kind of fig or something, or some kind of fruit. Most likely was not an apple. But we use an apple. It's just kind of like how we, Sunday school, they use a whale for a fish that swallowed Jonah, when clearly a fish should be more closely that of a shark, because a shark is actually a fish, an amphibian, and a whale is a mammal. But in any event, no, I get it. The most important thing is that Jesus Christ rose from the dead, that God loved us enough that he sent his son to literally free us from ourselves, to free us from this diseased Adamic race that we were born into. That's why I'm always saying that it's because of the second Adam, the second Adam being Jesus Christ, that we're able to now bring fruition to God and have fellowship with God. The fact that God loved his creation that much is indeed a divine miracle. He didn't have to love us. He didn't have to choose us. He didn't have to select us. And in fact, even when the Bible in the Old Testament, when it talks about Israel, he says, I didn't choose you, Israel, because you were the mightiest. I didn't choose you because you were the most numerous. I chose you because you were the smallest, the weakest, and I loved you. And it says that in the Old Testament. So God had chose Israel because he chose Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He met a man named Abraham. Actually created a man named Abraham. But when he looked down on the sea of humanity, he saw something in Abraham that made him happy, that made him want to be friends with Abraham. And that's why the Bible calls Abraham was a friend of God. Same thing with Moses and with Elijah and all the heroes of faith. They had something that was uncommon to God. They were common men with something that was uncommon to God to make God select and choose them. With Noah, it says Noah found favor, found grace in the sight of the Lord. God looked down in Genesis 6:5. He was going to kill all of humanity. We could talk about that at a later time, but I believe it was it the book of Enoch? Or one of the books that are not canonized, but you can actually cross-reference them. And don't give me that nonsense about we're taking away and adding to the book, because that's specifically talking about the book of Revelation. You don't add to the book of Revelation. You don't take away from the book of Revelation, because it's a revelation of Jesus Christ, penned by the Apostle John when he was banished on the Isle of Patmos. You know, it's ironic. Incidentally enough, it is ironic because, you know, all the disciples ran when Jesus was crucified. They all ran off. They all were a bunch of chicken liver weasel cowards. I got tongue twisted there for a second. You got to excuse me, guys. Pardon that. But they were chicken liver weasel cowards, and they ran. I'll die with you, Lord. Peter said, I'll die with you. And he chopped off Malchus's ear because he couldn't get his head. And Jesus said, put your sword back in your sheath. He that lives by the sword dies by the sword. And so Jesus grits Malchus's ear and he puts it back on. The servant of the high priest heals his ear. But Peter said, Lord, I'll die with you. And then he ran off. Got jammed up by a woman at a fire ring. I don't know the man. I don't know the dude. Denied him 3 times. But yet, when Jesus returned, and Peter had turned back to Jesus, to God, he was out on a boat fishing with his buddies. And the Bible tells us that he had stripped for work. Now, why he was naked in a boat full of dudes, I don't know. I believe what it meant is he took off his outer garments and had whatever his fishing garments were. Or maybe he was butt naked. I don't know, man. Maybe he was naked. You know, maybe he was acting like a nudist or something. I don't know. But the Bible says he had stripped for work. He was out there fishing. And this guy calls from on shore. He says, hey, have you got any fish? And he said, no. He says, well, try the other side of the boat. Dropped the net, and it's so full of fish it began to tear. And I think it was John, because it referred to him as the disciple that Jesus loved, said, it's the Lord. And Peter said, it's the Lord. He jumped in the water and jumped naked in the water and swam to shore to see Jesus. And Jesus is out there cooking him breakfast or dinner. And that's when we get the whole thing about follow me, feed my lambs, and you know I love you, I like you a lot, Lord, you know it. I mean, Peter started to weep. And he says, you know I love you, Jesus. And he says, then follow me. And he says, what about him? Talking about John. And he says, what's it to you if I want him to remain until I return? You follow me. Talking about the death that Peter was gonna have to glorify God, that he was literally gonna get crucified upside down, that he was gonna have a chance to escape Emperor Nero's Christian carnival. His Christian carnival was he was killing Christians for pure pleasure and joy because it made him happy to do so. He dragged them through the streets, boiled them with oil, lit them on fire, crucified them, fed them to lions, fed them to tigers, fed them to bears, fed them to gladiators, did every jacked up thing you could think of to kill Christians, and he was happy to do it. Obviously demon possessed. Obviously Satan inspired. But Peter's escape in Rome, if you read it in the original unedited where it wasn't omitted, Fox's Book of Martyrs, that original text is like something like 500 to 900 pages. It's not like the one they sell in the Christian bookstore today with the lion on the cover. That thing makes me mad. That thing gets me all fired up because a lot of it's missing. They have a whole account of Bloody Mary. The real Bloody Mary. And it's not some Bloody Mary where you're looking in a mirror and chanting her name. She was more scary than her, I'll tell you that. She wanted the church to go back to Catholicism, and she was killing all the Protestants, thus getting the name Bloody Mary. I believe she even killed her sister or cousin or niece or something. I think it was her sister. Another sister she banished or something. But this Emperor Nero was killing Christians. And Peter's on his way out. According to Fox's Book of Martyrs, the version that's not edited and the account is not omitted or shortened. Not the book with the lion on it. Although that looks really cool, I'm really disturbed by that interpretation of the original book. It's just so watered down and weak. But anyway, so he's on his way out. And the Lord appears to him. And he says, "Where?" He says, "Lord." He said, "What are you doing here? Where are you going?" He says, "I'm going to be crucified again." Now Peter knew Jesus was going to be crucified again. And he realized that it was his time to honor God. And he walked back into Rome, where this was taking place. turned himself in, and they went to crucify him. And he said, I'm not worthy to be crucified like my Lord. I'm not worthy to be crucified like Jesus. Turn me upside down. They called it the crisscross, right? And they flipped him upside down and crucified him. He died, glorifying God. Same day, the Apostle Paul beheaded on an undisclosed location, approximately 67 AD. I say approximately because the years are debated somewhat. 67, 66. I've heard 64, 63, and 69. But approximately 67, 68 AD, 67 AD is how I read and studied it, so we'll go with that for now. They were killed and martyred on the same day. But the Apostle John, I say that it's funny, it's ironic, because out of all the disciples that ran off, the biblical account tells us that he was at the crucifixion. He watched Jesus die. The Apostle John, John Zebedee, one of the sons of thunder, the youngest of the bunch, the one described as the apostle, the disciple that Jesus loved, the one who used to lean his head on his breast. Who's going to betray you, Lord? The young one. But he was at the crucifixion with the women. And Jesus looked at his mother Mary, and he says, Woman, this is your son. And he said, Young man, this is your mother. And from that point on, John took Mary into his home. But John Zebedee was banished on the Isle of Patmos because this idiotic emperor decided to boil him with oil, and he didn't die, and God miraculously healed him by the power of God. And so he was terrified, and he said, let's just send him out to Patmos, send him as far away from the kingdom as possible. I don't want this dude near me. He was terrified. And so Jesus appeared to him, and he penned the book of Revelation. Revelation singular because it's a revelation of Jesus Christ and of the last days, not revelations, more than one revelation. As they say in Hollywood, you see that in movies where they say they call it revelations, and I'm like, no, it's revelation. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. But he died in Ephesus. Didn't die in Patmos. He came back to Ephesus. The historic account is that he lived to be 100. But Jesus told Peter, if I want him to remain until I return, what's that to you? You follow me. You know, Jesus tells us the same thing today. What's it to you if I'm dealing with this brother another way? You follow me. What's it to you if I want him to go through a particular trial? Now, does God send trials? Look, I don't know. We could argue that. I know that God enters in when you have a trial. I know that. I know if you pray for patience, it's the most stupidest, crazy thing you could ever pray for, because you're going to be tested on that. If you pray for patience, your patience are going to be developed and not in a way you're going to like. So I personally wouldn't pray for patience. I just pray for God to get out of me what he wants to get out of me, and that he gives me the grace to survive this life and not fail him. That's the way I'd pray personally. That's just me. Maybe I'm just messed up in the head. I don't know. Wouldn't doubt it. I probably am. I don't know. But God deals with us all differently. Doesn't deal with an even hand. It's his creation. He can do whatever he wants with it. But he's great because he chooses to love us. Even if sometimes we're unlovable, he still loves us. That's a great God. That's a compassionate God. And that's the God that sent his son, that sent Jesus. A manifestation of himself in the flesh. And that's the message for tonight. I am done talking for tonight. So God bless you all. And You can hear me again on Thursday if you so choose to. That's the message.